Part 1, In the Beginning, The Arrival of the Gods. The world before memory was a silence so deep that even the wind had not yet learned to whisper. The earth was young, its surface restless beneath a haze of steam and salt. Mountains bled fire, and oceans trembled against the crust of creation. There were no names, no kingdoms, only the slow rhythm of a planet becoming. In this vast emptiness, ancient eyes watched from beyond the stars. They came not from one place but from many, an assembly of minds so old that the birth of suns was familiar to them. They had seen galaxies collapse into dust and life arise again like a spark in the cosmic sea. Among them, one world turned its gaze toward the infant earth. Its people, whom the later Sumerians would call the Anunnaki, the princely host, were drawn to this blue orb for reasons that would echo through human legend. The heavens opened like a scar, and from the void, their ships descended, great spheres and disks of shining metal, moving not by wings or fire, but by the will of their makers. The early earth trembled at their arrival. Volcanoes groaned, seas parted, lightning licked the clouds like living veins. It was the dawn of a myth that would outlast the pyramids, the ziggurats, and even the languages that named them. Where their vessels landed, the air thickened with dust and ozone. The Anunnaki stepped forth, tall, radiant beings whose faces shimmered like molten gold beneath the sun. Their eyes carried the stillness of ages, and in their veins flowed the memory of stars. They walked upon the earth as gods, and the earth received them as such. Rivers curved to meet their reflection, and the beasts of the plains knelt before them as though the planet itself recognized its makers. In the shadow of the Persian Gulf, where the rivers of Tigris and Euphrates intertwined like twin serpents, they built their first outpost. It was not yet Sumer, not yet Eridu or Ur, but something older, an experiment in creation. The Anunnaki divided themselves according to purpose. To some was given dominion over the sky, to others the waters, to others still, the fertile soil from which life would rise. Among them, the great leader Anu reigned, the father of the heavens. Beneath him were Enlil, the lord of wind and command, and Enki, master of the deep and keeper of knowledge. Enki was unlike the others. He loved the sea, the pulse of life that stirred beneath its waves. While his kin looked to conquer, Enki sought to shape. It was he who first walked barefoot upon the mudflats and saw potential in the clay. He touched it with curiosity, and it yielded beneath his hand. It was formless yet waiting, like an echo longing for a voice. And so began the dream of mankind. The Anunnaki labored upon the earth, shaping its hills, irrigating its plains, cutting canals that shimmered under the newborn sun. The world changed beneath their tools of light and sound. What had been wilderness became garden. They built temples of crystal and metal that drank sunlight and sang with resonance. To mortals, these would later seem miracles, structures that defied decay, glowing with energy drawn from the planet itself. But this was not a paradise. The work was endless, the harvests demanded precision, and the Anunnaki grew weary. They had not descended to serve, they had come to rule, to extract the gold and minerals that would sustain their own distant home. The toil became burden, and among their ranks arose dissent. Why should we, the sons of the heavens, sweat beneath the sun of this lesser world? They cried. And in their restlessness, destiny took its next breath. Enki, observing their struggle, conceived of a solution, a creation that would ease their labor. He would craft a being strong enough to serve, yet capable of wonder. His idea was met with resistance. Enlil, stern and prideful, warned that meddling with life would defy cosmic order. But Enki, ever the seeker of balance, persisted. We shall not create slaves, he said, but partners, mirrors of our image who may one day walk beside us. And so, in the valley that would one day cradle the city of Eridu, Enki and his sister Ninhursag gathered the essence of the earth, the red clay of the rivers, the spark of life that slept within it, and the breath of the heavens. By combining these, they gave form to the first prototype of mankind. It was a fragile creature, trembling and speechless, a flicker of consciousness trapped within mortal flesh. The Anunnaki gathered around the being as it took its first breath. Its eyes opened, reflecting both confusion and light. Enki smiled, for he saw in it not weakness, but the echo of divine intelligence. Yet the creature could not endure, its flesh failed, its spirit flickered out. Again and again, Enki molded, infused, refined, each time closer to perfection. The work consumed years that felt like moments to the gods. At last, he succeeded. The first true human rose from the clay, strong, aware, and filled with awe for its makers. Enki looked upon his creation and named it Adamu, meaning, one made from the earth. The Anunnaki watched as this new being stood upright, breathing the air of his world as his creators did. In that instant, the universe shifted. A boundary had been crossed. The gods had made life in their own image. Adamu and his kin multiplied under the guidance of the Anunnaki. They learned to speak, to tend the land, to worship the lights in the sky that had birthed their gods. The earth grew abundant, but so did ambition. Enlil looked upon mankind with disapproval. He saw in them imperfection, noise, hunger, disobedience. Where Enki saw hope, Enlil saw contamination. Thus began the divine schism that would shape the destiny of both gods and men. As centuries passed, the cities of the Anunnaki rose like stars upon the plains, Eridu, Nippur, and Uruk, centers of power, knowledge, and ritual. The humans toiled beneath them, mining, farming, and building ziggurats that climbed toward the heavens. Smoke from their offerings curled into the skies, a bridge between mortal and divine. And though mankind was born to serve, it began to dream. The Anunnaki ruled from above their towers, yet among them, compassion and cruelty walked hand in hand. Inanna, goddess of love and war, brought both fertility and destruction to those who pleased or angered her. Ninhursag taught healing and the secrets of the herbs. Enlil thundered from the clouds, demanding obedience. And Enki, the rebel among gods, whispered forbidden wisdom into human ears. Under his quiet influence, mankind began to understand more than it was meant to. They learned writing, numbers, the patterns of the stars, the art of building, the music of the lyre, and the measure of time. Each discovery lifted them higher, closer to the level of their creators. The gods began to fear their own reflection. Then came the rebellion, the first whisper of defiance. A group of humans, driven by pride and knowledge, refused the yoke. They fled into the marshlands, building hidden villages where they worshipped not the gods, but the earth itself. When Enlil learned of this, his wrath darkened the skies. Storms ravaged the plains. Rivers rose in vengeance. It was the first punishment of mankind, and yet, they survived. Enki protected them in secret. He could not watch his creation perish for its curiosity. He sent them messages in dreams, guiding them to high ground, teaching them to build shelters that could withstand the floods. And in these acts of quiet rebellion, Enki became mankind's secret guardian, a god who loved too deeply the beings he had made. But harmony could not last. The gods quarreled among themselves as the world filled with life. The balance between heaven and earth tilted dangerously. And somewhere, deep within the laboratories of Eridu, a new experiment began, one that would fuse divine and mortal blood. It was said that the children born from these unions possessed eyes that glowed like starlight. They were stronger, wiser, and more radiant than any mortal, yet they carried within them the seed of mortality. These were the Nephilim, the giants of old, heroes and tyrants alike. Their birth shook the heavens, for they were neither fully god nor fully man, and their existence broke the laws of creation. Enlil decreed that they must be destroyed, for they were an abomination. Enki argued that they were the future, a bridge between two worlds. The council of the gods divided, and the earth trembled beneath their dispute. The wars of the heavens spilled into the mortal realm, and mankind became both pawn and prize. As the skies blazed with divine fire, the oceans heaved, and the mountains cracked, Enki foresaw that the world as they knew it would not survive. The experiment of creation had escaped its bounds. And thus, he prepared a secret, an ark of knowledge, not of wood and sail, but of memory and seed, hidden deep within the waters of the gulf. There he preserved the wisdom of the stars, waiting for a time when humanity could rise again, free from divine rule. When the cataclysm finally came, the great flood that would be remembered in 1,000 tongues, mankind perished by the millions. Yet one man, guided by Enki's whisper, survived. His name would be recorded as Ziusidra, Atrahasis, and later Noah. he carried within him the spark of renewal. The gods mourned what they had wrought, for the flood had washed away not only corruption but the echoes of their own glory. When the waters receded, the Anunnaki descended once more to the scarred earth. They found ruins where cities had been, silence where prayers once rose. Enlil repented, Enki wept, and the survivors of mankind crawled from the mountains to rebuild. The gods withdrew from open rule, retreating to the heavens or to hidden realms beneath the earth. Their temples crumbled, their names faded into myth, but their legacy endured in the blood of those they had made. And so began the next age, the age of remembrance. The humans, no longer servants but storytellers, carried with them the memory of shining beings who descended from the sky and taught them to speak, to build, to dream. They called them gods, angels, watchers. But in the oldest tongue, the name still whispered through the reeds of the Euphrates was Anunnaki. As dusk fell over the plains of Mesopotamia, the stars emerged, each one perhaps a home of gods who once walked here. The wind carried the scent of clay and memory. The earth had changed forever, and humanity had begun its long journey through time. But somewhere, beyond the veil of heaven, the Anunnaki watched still, waiting for the day when their children would look to the skies and remember. Part 2, The Kingdoms of the Sky, the Rule of Enlil. The floodwaters had retreated, leaving behind a world reshaped by loss and silence. The rivers of the two lands, Tigris and Euphrates, no longer roared with pride but whispered through valleys of mud and bone. Where the great cities of the gods once gleamed, there now lay only ruins, half buried beneath the silt of the new earth. Smoke rose from the ashes of temples that had touched the stars, and the wind carried the ghosts of forgotten hymns. Humanity began again, barefoot and trembling, upon the soil that had been washed clean of memory. The survivors did not understand what had happened. They spoke of thunder that spoke in words, of the sea swallowing the sun, of voices from the heavens weeping for their children. In the dim light of dawn, they built small fires and told stories to keep the dark away. Stories of the gods who once walked among them, the Anunnaki who shaped men from clay and fire. And though their names had begun to fade, one name remained, whispered with both reverence and fear, Enlil, Lord of the Sky and Master of the Winds. To Enlil, the flood had been necessary, a purging, a reset of divine order. In his eyes, mankind had grown too bold, too close to the secrets of heaven. They had built towers that reached for the stars, spoken words meant only for gods, and dared to hold the knowledge that belonged to eternity. Enlil believed the world must be ruled, not shared. And in the new dawn, he would make certain the hierarchy was never broken again. From his seat in Nippur, Enlil surveyed the land. The temple of Eker, rebuilt from the ruins, stood like a mountain of white stone upon the plain, its summit piercing the mists of morning. Around it rose the new cities of Man, Uruk, Kish, Lagash, each one a spark of revival, yet all bound beneath the laws of heaven. The Anunnaki had returned, but not as before. They no longer walked openly among the people. Instead, they ruled through chosen intermediaries, kings, priests, and interpreters of divine will. The first of these kings was Etana of Kish, called the shepherd who ascended to heaven. His story would later become a legend told in clay and song. It was said that Enlil himself appointed him, gifting him with a divine destiny, to restore order, to lead mankind as the bridge between heaven and earth. Yet the truth was more complex. Etana was both chosen and bound, a servant crowned with gold, tasked with maintaining Enlil's vision of control. The age of divine kingship had begun. In this new order, every city reflected the will of a god. Nippur belonged to Enlil, Eridu to Enki, Ur to Nana the Moon Lord, and Uruk to Inanna, whose passions burned brighter than the dawn. The heavens were divided into domains, each god reigning over their portion like a noble over their estate. The humans beneath them became reflections of this celestial hierarchy, bound by faith and fear to the beings who had once created them. Yet Enlil's rule was not gentle. His justice was swift, his wrath unrelenting. When the people failed to offer tribute, the skies would close, and the rains would vanish. Fields withered, rivers shrank into serpentine scars. Famine crept across the plains like a shadow. To appease the angry god, the priests of Nippur would climb the temple steps, their chants trembling in the air, offering grain, wine, and the blood of goats. Sometimes, when the droughts were worst, they offered more. But humanity endured. Under the rule of kings who called themselves servants of Enlil, they learned to rebuild. They discovered the secret of the brick, the strength of kiln and clay. They raised ziggurats toward the stars, not as defiance but as devotion. The smoke of incense rose in spirals, mingling with the wind that was Enlil's breath. Each morning, as the sun rose over the rivers, the people bowed to the east and gave thanks for life renewed. Still, not all gods shared Enlil's vision. In the depths of Eridu, Enki watched the unfolding world with quiet melancholy. He saw mankind struggling beneath divine decree, laboring, starving, praying, and his heart stirred with compassion. "They have suffered enough," he whispered to the waters. "We made them to live, not merely to serve." But Enlil's laws were unbreakable, and even the Lord of Wisdom could not openly challenge him again. The heavens had been divided after the flood, an uneasy truce carved into eternity. It was during this time that knowledge began to return to mankind. Enki, bound by cosmic oath yet unwilling to abandon his creation, found subtle ways to pass on fragments of wisdom. He inspired dreams, whispered to artisans, and guided the hands of builders. It was through these quiet gifts that humans learned the art of irrigation, the pattern of seasons, the rhythm of the plow. The land flourished once more, and the first great age of civilization dawned. From the delta of the rivers rose Sumer, the first true kingdom of men. Its fields shimmered like green glass beneath the sun, its canals glistened with life, and its people sang hymns to the gods who had shaped them. The Anunnaki were no longer visible, but their presence lingered in every ritual, every law, every breath of wind. Statues of gold and lapis lazuli stood in their likeness, tall, wide-eyed figures with wings of stone and crowns of serpents. The people bowed before them, unaware that the real gods watched from afar, their gaze hidden behind the veil of clouds. As Sumer grew, so too did the pride of its rulers. Kings began to see themselves not merely as servants of the gods, but as gods themselves. The line between mortal and divine blurred. Enlil saw this with unease. He remembered the rebellion of the first men, the defiance that had brought the flood. The seed of disobedience, he feared, had not been washed away. To prevent history from repeating, he decreed that kingship should never linger in one city for too long. It would move from Kish to Uruk, from Uruk to Ur, ensuring no single mortal power could rival the heavens. But even gods cannot chain ambition forever. Among the people of Uruk rose a king unlike any other, Gilgamesh, 2/3 divine and 1/3 mortal. His power, his beauty, his restless heart, these would come to define an age. Enlil regarded him with suspicion, for within Gilgamesh burned the same defiant spark that Enki had once kindled in mankind. Gilgamesh sought immortality, the one gift the gods had forbidden. His journey would become legend, his failure a lesson. But in that failure lay a truth that Enlil could not erase: humanity had begun to dream beyond its limits. As centuries passed, the cities of Sumer thrived under Enlil's unseen hand. Trade flowed through the rivers, temples rose higher, the first libraries of clay tablets filled with songs of devotion and wisdom. Humanity, guided yet constrained, became the reflection of divine order. But beneath the surface, a quiet rebellion continued. The descendants of those who had once fled into the marshes kept their old ways, worshipping the earth and the stars directly, without intermediaries. They were called heretics, but they preserved something purer, a memory of when gods and men had spoken as equals. The age of Enlil's dominion was one of splendor and control, yet it was not eternal. The heavens themselves began to stir with unrest. The other Anunnaki grew restless, questioning the endless hierarchy. Inanna, the radiant queen of Uruk, defied her uncle's decrees and waged wars of passion and conquest. Nanna, the moon god, whispered doubts among his followers. And in the heart of Eridu, Enki's forbidden knowledge spread like fire among mortals who were ready to listen. The balance that Enlil had fought to preserve began to waver. Kings sought independence. Priests questioned prophecy. And mankind, though still kneeling, had begun to open its eyes. The gods, once untouchable, found their influence challenged by the very beings they had molded. Enlil's winds grew harsh, storms tearing through the land as if to remind creation who ruled the skies. Yet the more he punished, the more the people endured. Suffering had taught them strength. In one quiet moment, atop the high terraces of Nippur, Enlil looked down upon the earth and felt something unexpected: doubt. The stars shimmered above him, silent witnesses to an eternal story. Had he been wrong? Had the flood truly restored balance, or merely delayed the inevitable? Somewhere, far beyond his reach, Enki's laughter rippled through the cosmos, soft as rain. The world moved forward, guided by invisible threads. The age of Enlil's absolute rule would fade, giving way to an age of exploration, of rebellion, of kings who spoke to gods as equals and gods who walked once more among mortals. The Anunnaki, who had come to Earth as masters, would find themselves entangled in the destiny of their own creation. The experiment was no longer theirs to control. As night fell upon the plains of Sumer, the people looked to the sky. The constellations shone like ancient signatures, the symbols of Anu, Enlil, and Enki, written in light upon the heavens. A child asked his father, "Who made the stars?" The man looked up, eyes reflecting both fear and wonder. "The gods," he said softly, "but perhaps they made us to remember them." The wind swept across the ziggurats, carrying with it the scent of incense and clay. Somewhere, deep within the unseen realm, Enlil turned his gaze toward humanity, no longer merely subjects, but heirs to the divine spark. And though he did not yet know it, the era of obedience was ending. The age of enlightenment was about to begin. The sky darkened, and in its depths, the stars of the Anunnaki shimmered like eyes, watchful, eternal, and waiting for what came next. Part 3: The Golden Age of the Anunnaki, when gods walked among men. Before the deserts, before the great cities turned to dust, there was an age when the gods walked in sunlight. The winds were warm, the rivers were full, and the world hummed with a harmony that has long since been forgotten. This was the Golden Age, a time when the Anunnaki lived among men, not as distant rulers cloaked in thunder, but as presences of power and knowledge, striding the earth they had shaped with their own hands. The scars of the flood had faded, the soil grown fertile again. From the mountains of the east to the western sea, life bloomed as though creation itself had been reborn. Temples rose like living hearts at the centers of cities, their walls carved with symbols that caught the morning light. The people of Sumer, Akkad, and Elam believed they were the chosen children of the gods, and in those days, it seemed true. Enki walked once more beside the rivers of Eridu, his eyes reflecting the deep blue of the waters he loved. He taught men the secrets of metal, the crafting of bronze and copper, the shaping of tools and instruments that could turn labor into art. Under his guidance, canals expanded across the land like veins, carrying water and life into every field. He smiled to see his creation thriving, though he knew that peace in heaven was as fragile as peace on earth. Inanna, radiant and terrible, claimed the city of Uruk as her throne. To her people, she was both goddess and queen, the morning star that rose before dawn, the fire that could not be extinguished. Her temples were filled with music and passion, with offerings of gold and myrrh, and the echoes of dancers who celebrated her in the moonlight. She taught the people of Uruk the power of beauty, of desire, of war, for she believed creation itself was born from the clash between love and chaos. Enlil, high above them all, ruled from Nippur. He no longer walked among mortals as he once had, his presence was felt through the storms, his voice through the wind. Yet he watched, and he judged. The world below was his order, his law. But in his heart, he began to sense something changing. The boundaries between God and man, once as clear as the horizon, were blurring. The kings of the cities began to take pride in more than just obedience. They saw the gods not as masters but as partners, ancestors whose blood flowed in their own veins. They claimed descent from Enki, from Inanna, from Utu the Sun Lord. And in a way, they were right. For in those days, the bloodlines of heaven had mingled with the daughters of earth. The children of those unions grew tall and wise, bearing within them the spark of both realms. They were called the Nephilim by later tongues, giants in stature, but greater still in mind and spirit. They were the builders of the impossible, temples that scraped the clouds, gardens that floated above rivers, machines of stone that hummed with energies lost to time. The world they made glittered beneath the sun, and for a moment, it seemed that paradise had been restored. In those centuries, mankind reached heights that would echo through every age to come. The ziggurats of Ur stood higher than any mountain of men. The libraries of Nippur and Uruk were filled with clay tablets inscribed with the mysteries of the stars, the paths of the planets, and the cycles of the moon. Mathematics, astronomy, architecture, all were gifts whispered into mortal ears by divine teachers. The Anunnaki, having shaped life, now shaped destiny. But with knowledge came questioning. The priests who studied the stars began to ask why they moved as they did, and whether their gods were bound by the same celestial order. The scribes who recorded the histories began to wonder why the gods grew jealous, why they waged wars, why they demanded tribute. The first doubt was born, not of defiance, but of curiosity. Enki encouraged this quietly. He had always believed that the greatest gift was understanding, even if it led to rebellion. But Enlil saw it as a threat. To him, knowledge without obedience was chaos reborn. He warned that the Golden Age was tilting toward pride, and pride had always been the seed of downfall. And yet, for a time, the world still glittered. The people sang of the days when Inanna rode her chariot of gold through the skies, when the fields of Lagash shimmered like emerald oceans, when kings communed with gods beneath the moon. They sang of Dumuzi, the shepherd king, who loved Inanna and brought peace to the lands. They sang of Utu, the sun god, whose chariot marked the passage of time, and who saw all things, the just and the unjust. But no golden age lasts forever. The first crack appeared in Uruk. Inanna, the brilliant and untamed, desired dominion beyond her city. Her heart burned with ambition, to rule all lands, to ascend beyond the limits even the heavens had placed. She challenged Enlil's authority, declaring that love and war were the true engines of creation, not order and obedience. Her armies marched across Sumer, banners of crimson and gold fluttering against the wind. For the first time since the flood, gods turned against gods, and men followed them into battle. The wars of the Anunnaki were unlike any fought by mortals. The skies burned with storms not of nature but of power. Great cities were consumed in light, rivers turned red with fire. The people called it the War of the Heavens, though it was waged upon earth. Enlil's loyalists held Nippur and Ur, Inanna's forces took Uruk and marched toward the north. The balance of the world trembled. Enki, as ever, sought peace. He moved between the factions, pleading for restraint, but his words were drowned by thunder. He knew what few others did, that their battles were not merely over territory, but over destiny itself. The question was no longer who ruled the earth, but whether the gods would allow humanity to rise or keep it forever beneath their heel. The war raged for generations. Temples crumbled, knowledge was lost, and the once harmonious world began to fracture. The Nephilim, the children of gods and men, became divided, some standing with Enlil, others with Inanna, and a few retreating into exile. Legends would later call them the Titans, the Watchers, the lords of the forgotten cities. In time, exhaustion overcame even the immortals. The war ended not with victory, but with silence. Inanna was forced to descend into the underworld, a punishment and a lesson. Her descent became a myth, her resurrection a symbol, that even gods could die and return. The cities she had ruled were left in ruins, and the people rebuilt once more, as they always had. Enlil's authority was restored, but his power was no longer absolute. Humanity had seen too much. They had glimpsed the fragility of their gods, their passions, their wars. Reverence turned to weary devotion. The temples were still filled with prayers, but beneath them, the old songs of freedom began to stir again. And so the Golden Age began to fade. Slowly, quietly, like the last embers of a dying fire. The gods withdrew from the open world, retreating to the mountains and the heavens. Their temples remained, but they no longer walked among the people. Kings ruled in their name, but the true presence of the divine became a memory, a story told by grandfathers at dusk. The Nephilim disappeared. Some say they returned to the stars, ascending through gates of fire to the home world of their ancestors, the place mankind would one day call Nibiru. Others say they went into the deep earth, beneath the deserts and seas, waiting for a time when the balance would return. The truth was lost, as all truths are, buried beneath layers of time and fear. In the final centuries of the Golden Age, Enki made one last attempt to guide humanity. He appeared in dreams to a chosen few, scribes, seers, kings. To one of them, a man named Adapa, he gave the wisdom of the winds and the stars. Adapa became the first true priest, the bridge between worlds, yet even he could not break the cycle. The gods had grown weary of their creation, and humanity, though thriving, no longer looked upward for answers. The skies grew quieter. The stars seemed more distant. The temples turned from homes of gods into monuments of memory. What had once been a living covenant became ritual. The people forgot that they had once spoken directly to the divine. But the Anunnaki had not truly left. Their essence lingered, in the stones of their temples, in the bloodlines of kings, in the unexplainable leaps of human progress that would come again and again. Every 1,000 years, a spark of their influence would return, a sudden rise of knowledge, a burst of invention, a whisper from the past. And always, in the heavens, one wandering star continued its long orbit, distant, red, and patient. The home of the gods. The watchers from the sky. Enki watched too, from the hidden places of the deep waters, and murmured softly, "They will remember." The rivers flowed on. The sands covered the ruins. Empires rose and fell, and the stars, indifferent and eternal, continued their dance. But beneath it all, the story of the Anunnaki remained, not as myth, but as memory. The memory of a time when gods walked the earth, and humanity, for a fleeting moment, touched the stars. Part 4. The Fall of the Gods. Secrets buried beneath the sands. The deserts were not always deserts. Once, the land was green. Rivers ran like veins through the heart of Mesopotamia, their waters shimmering beneath the sun. But time is cruel, and the earth forgets even its gods. As the centuries passed, the world that the Anunnaki had shaped began to wither. Their temples stood hollow, their ziggurats crumbling beneath layers of dust, the winds whispering through doorways once filled with hymns. It was said that Enlil turned his face away from the earth, his throne in the heavens cloaked by storms. Enki withdrew into the abyss, his laughter fading beneath the sea. Inanna's temple lay silent, her priests whispered that she had descended once more into the underworld, but this time she did not return. The age of the gods was ending, not with war, not with fire, but with silence. The people of Sumer continued their rituals. Every dawn, the priests of Nippur still climbed the great ziggurat and poured libations to the absent sky. They offered grain and wine, singing ancient songs whose meanings had long been forgotten. To them, the gods had become shadows of memory, stories kept alive through devotion rather than presence. Yet the silence grew heavier each year. The voices of the Anunnaki no longer answered their prayers. And then came the droughts. The rivers shrank. The fertile plains turned brittle beneath the sun's relentless gaze. Crops failed, hunger spread. The once golden cities of Ur and Eridu fell into desperation. People abandoned the temples, seeking refuge where water still flowed. Some blamed Enki for abandoning them. Others cursed Enlil for his wrath. But the truth was deeper, a slow unraveling of the bond that had once tied gods and men. In those dying days of divine presence, the last of the Nephilim still walked the earth. They were no longer giants of might, but weary remnants of a fading race. They had seen the world through its creation, its flood, its golden splendor, and now they watched as everything they had built began to crumble. Their numbers were few, their purpose uncertain. Some wandered north, following the mountains. Others retreated to hidden sanctuaries, leaving behind only carvings and warnings for those who might one day awaken the memory of what once was. Among these watchers was one named Utu-Abzu, a descendant of both Enki and mortal blood. He had inherited not power, but memory, visions of a time when light itself obeyed the will of the gods. Utu-Abzu wandered the lands of Sumer in silence, carrying with him a single relic, a disk of gold etched with spirals and stars, said to be the key to understanding the heavens. It was known as the Tablet of Destiny, though none living knew how to read it. He came to Uruk, where the once mighty temples of Inanna now stood empty. The city was a skeleton of stone and shadow. In the central courtyard, beneath a cracked statue of the goddess, Utuabzu knelt and whispered into the wind, "You gave us your light, and we built towers. But now the sky is silent." Was this the lesson? There was no answer. Only the soft hiss of sand sliding across the floor, as if the desert itself had taken the place of the gods. Far to the east, in the city of Kish, a new power was rising. A mortal king named Etna claimed to have ascended to heaven on the back of an eagle, not a literal ascent, perhaps, but a vision. He declared himself the bridge between gods and men. The priests of Nippur hailed him as a chosen one, a rebirth of divine will, and for a time, faith returned. But even Etna could not summon the old voices. He died as all men do, and his tomb became another mound beneath the sands. The last of the true temples to Enlil fell soon after. The great ziggurat of Nippur, once the heart of heaven's order, cracked under the weight of centuries. Its upper tiers collapsed into dust, and the priests, too few to rebuild, fled into the wilderness. The people no longer prayed to Enlil for rain, they prayed to the sky itself, to nameless forces that neither punished nor blessed them. And so it was that humanity began to forget. The Anunnaki, who had once been kings and teachers, became myths. Their names softened in the tongues of later generations. Enki became Ea, Inanna became Ishtar, Enlil became El. The stories that once told of divine machines and luminous cities were rewritten as fables of magic and miracle. History turned into legend, legend turned into religion. Yet in the forgotten corners of the world, remnants of their power still lingered. Beneath the ruins of Eridu, deep within chambers that no human had entered in centuries, strange lights still flickered. Machines of unknown purpose hummed faintly beneath the earth, powered by forces long lost to human knowledge. Some said they were the hearts of the gods, their essence sealed away until the world was ready once more. Meanwhile, the world changed. The Akkadians rose from the north, fierce and ambitious. Under their king, Sargon of Akkad, they conquered the scattered Sumerian city-states, uniting them beneath a single rule. Sargon claimed to be chosen by Inanna herself, and his banners bore her star. He built great cities, restored the canals, and declared himself the ruler of the four quarters of the earth. To many, it seemed the gods had returned through him. But this empire too was built on the bones of silence. Though Sargon spoke of divine favor, he never heard the voices of the Anunnaki. His priests prayed, but their prayers echoed back unanswered. And deep within the royal archives of Akkad, scribes began to record stories that hinted at a troubling truth, that the gods had left the earth not by choice, but by exile. One ancient tablet, cracked and blackened by fire, told of a council of the gods, a final gathering before their departure. Enki had warned that humanity's hunger for knowledge would outgrow its obedience, that to stay would mean endless war. Enlil, weary of humanity's defiance, decreed that the divine should return to their origin, to Nibiru, the wandering world. The others had agreed, each leaving behind a fragment of their essence, a mark, a relic, a dream. The last line of the tablet read, "When the red star returns to the place of crossing, we shall walk again among the dust." Millennia later, astronomers would call it myth. But even now, that red wandering star, Nibiru, the 12th planet, haunted the edges of memory. The centuries that followed were harsh. The Akkadian Empire fell to drought and rebellion. The Gudians swept across Mesopotamia, leaving ruin in their wake. The knowledge once guarded by the priest-kings of Sumer was scattered, burned, or buried. What survived was rewritten, coded into hymns, legends, and prophecies. By the time Babylon rose, the Anunnaki had become gods of an ancient and distant past, half remembered, half divine. But not all knowledge was lost. In the deserts, far from the empires, wanderers found strange ruins, doorways carved into cliffs, chambers lined with cuneiform so precise it seemed machine-made. Inside these places, they discovered relics that defied their understanding, obsidian mirrors that reflected no light, metal tablets that hummed when touched, sculptures of beings with eyes like stars. The locals feared them, calling them houses of the Watchers. Few who entered returned unchanged. Among the scholars of Babylon, whispers persisted that the priests of Eridu had not perished but gone underground, literally. Beneath the Euphrates, it was said, there existed an entire labyrinth of tunnels and chambers built by Enki's followers to preserve his wisdom. This hidden order, known only as the Keepers of the Deep, guarded what they called the 7 tablets of creation, records of humanity's true origin and the knowledge of the stars. The world above continued its march through ages, kings, conquests, and the endless rhythm of birth and death. Yet beneath it, in the quiet, the Anunnaki's legacy waited. Their story was not over, it had simply descended beneath the sands, where time itself moved differently. For even as humanity forgot the gods, the earth remembered. The old cities remained buried but intact, sealed beneath layers of clay and salt. Within them, carvings and devices still pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of something sleeping. It is said that once every few thousand years, a whisper stirs from beneath the ground, a hum that only the most sensitive can hear. Some claim it is merely wind through the ruins. Others say it is the echo of the Anunnaki, calling out across time, waiting for the children they made to remember who they truly are. And sometimes, in dreams, that call still comes. A vision of a red sky. A voice from the depths. Look to the heavens, it says, for we are not gone. But the world sleeps. Cities rise upon the bones of older cities. The sands cover the temples again and again. Humanity writes new gods, new stories, unaware that all of them are reflections of the same ancient truth, the memory of those who came from the stars, who walked among men, and who vanished into myth. Somewhere beneath the deserts of Iraq, beneath Eridu or Ur, the first city waits. Its chambers remain sealed. Within them, it is said, lies the last throne of Enki, a seat of crystal that hums with a faint light, unbroken by time. Those who have seen it in visions say it still watches, patient as the stars. And so the chapter closed. The gods fell not through battle, nor through rebellion, but through the quiet decay of memory. What was divine became historical, what was historical became symbolic, and what was symbolic became forgotten. But even forgotten things leave traces. The shape of ziggurats inspired pyramids. The flood became Noah's story. The star of Inanna became Venus, the morning star. The words of Enki echoed in the myths of other lands, wearing new names, Ea, Poseidon, Osiris. Civilizations would rise and fall, empires would crumble and rebuild, but in the silence between their stories, the same ancient rhythm would whisper, of gods, of stars, of those who once descended and promised to return. The sands keep their secrets well. But the earth remembers. And somewhere, beneath the shifting dunes, the story of the Anunnaki still breathes, waiting for the world to listen again. Part 5, The Hidden Bloodlines, the Children of the Gods. Long ago, when the dust of the first city still clung to the sandals of kings, when rivers still whispered the memory of divine feet that once walked upon their banks, there began to unfold a story far deeper than empires, the tale of bloodlines that bound heaven and earth. The Anunnaki had come from beyond the stars, from realms whispered to dwell in the folds of eternity. They had shaped mankind from clay and essence, crafting a being that carried the spark of divinity yet was bound by the frailty of flesh. But what the ancient tablets seldom say, what the priests feared to whisper even behind temple walls, is that the gods had not merely created humanity, they had mingled with it. In the fields of Sumer, under the shadow of ziggurats reaching for the firmament, men and women began to bear children whose eyes gleamed with strange light, neither wholly divine, nor mortal. These were the children of the gods, the firstborn of 2 worlds. And with them, a new era began, one of kingship, destiny, and concealed power. They called them the Watchers, the Shining Ones, the Nephilim in later tongues. Yet all stories trace back to that moment when the heavens fell in love with the earth. Under the quiet stars of Eridu, Enki's priests recorded in secret that the god had taken mortal companions, not out of lust, but out of sorrow. For Enki, the lord of the sweet waters, saw what his kin had done to the world, laboring men to build monuments of stone, using their sweat to fuel the ambitions of divine quarrels. He whispered to a few, teaching them how to read the flow of rivers, how to mark the seasons, how to heal the sick. From these lineages would arise sages, healers, astronomers, those who remembered fragments of the god's wisdom. But others were not so merciful. Among the stars, Anu's throne grew restless. He watched as his sons, Enlil and Enki, sowed discord upon the earth. The children born of this mingling began to show powers beyond the mortal kind, immense strength, long life, and the memory of things before the flood. And in this, the seeds of rebellion were sown. The gods had brought civilization, yet it was these half-divine children who carried it forward. It was they who became the early kings, the shepherds of men, as the tablets say. They were said to rule for hundreds of years, their reign stretching beyond the lives of their subjects, guiding humanity as both rulers and enigmas. But with power came corruption, and with knowledge came pride. The cities of Kish, Uruk, and Nippur began to boast of kings who descended from the heavens themselves. Temples grew taller, offerings heavier. The sky was not enough, men sought to build their own gateways to eternity. In the depths of the Eker, Enlil's great mountain temple, priests offered incense and lamentations. For they feared what humanity had become, mirrors of their makers, carrying the same hunger for dominion. It is said that Enlil, the Lord of Wind and Decree, summoned a council. They have gone too far, he declared. They were to serve, not to rule. Their blood has become impure. The order of heaven must be restored. The word struck the assembly like thunder. Ninmah, mother of the first creation, wept softly. Enki argued, pleading that mankind must be allowed to walk its path. But Enlil would not yield. They forget their place, he thundered. They defy the heavens. The verdict was made. The bloodlines would be thinned. The divine essence diluted. What followed was not recorded in stone, but remembered in shadow. Across the Mesopotamian plains, cities fell to mysterious plagues. Temples collapsed as the gods withdrew their presence. Rivers rose, and rains turned red with clay. Some said the gods had sent storms to wash away the taint of divinity. Others whispered that the half-divine fled into the mountains, into secret sanctuaries where they would wait, watching the fall of their mortal kin. Legends from Egypt to the Indus speak of tall beings who arrived from the east, bringing knowledge of stars, geometry, and language. Perhaps these were the same, the hidden bloodlines dispersing across the world, shaping new civilizations. The Maya would later call them the sky teachers, the Greeks the Titans, and the Hebrews the sons of Elohim. Every civilization kept their memory, not as myth, but as ancestry. In Sumer, the king list spoke of rulers who reigned for 1,200 years. In Egypt, the first dynasties were said to descend from those who came before. The thread was invisible, but unbroken. Yet, beneath all grandeur, a question haunted them: did the gods ever leave? In the ruins of Lagash, a clay cylinder tells of a dream seen by a priest. He saw a ladder of fire stretching between earth and heaven. Upon it descended a being of radiant gold. In its eyes were galaxies, and in its hands the seed of life. It spoke, "Not all are born of earth. Some return when the stars align once more." The priest awoke trembling, for he understood. The mingling had not ended, it had merely gone unseen. The royal bloodlines that rose afterward, in Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, all traced their ancestry back to a divine union. Even when the gods no longer walked openly, their memory persisted in coronation rituals, where kings were anointed by divine right, where the crown symbolized not authority, but the spark of heaven. And so the Anunnaki withdrew, their temples silent, their statues eroded by time, yet their legacy continued through the veins of humankind. The children of the gods walked among mortals, shaping destinies, building kingdoms, and dreaming of their return to the stars. Centuries later, the scribes would write of Gilgamesh, 2/3 divine, 1/3 man. He was the echo of that forgotten blood, the last flicker of an age when heaven had kissed the earth. Gilgamesh's quest for immortality, his search for Utnapishtim beyond the waters of death, was not merely the story of a king, it was the final song of the divine bloodline. He sought what his ancestors had lost, the bridge between mortality and eternity. In his tale lies the truth of all mankind, that every civilization that rose after, every temple, every prayer, every reach toward the heavens, was an attempt to reclaim what was once within us, the spark of the gods. When the stars burn quiet over the ancient plains, when the winds stir the dust of forgotten tombs, listen closely, for the blood remembers. the children of the gods are not gone. They merely sleep, waiting for the time when heaven and earth shall meet again. And thus, the hidden bloodlines endured, unseen, but eternal. Part 6, The Fall from the Heavens, the Great Divide among the Gods. The world that the Anunnaki built was no longer the pristine garden it had once been. Millennia had passed since their descent upon the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates, and the harmony that once connected gods and men had begun to fracture. Where once the golden ziggurats of Eridu and Nippur shone beneath the radiant sun, now smoke and the sound of quarrels drifted through the cities. The gods themselves were divided, and humanity stood at the edge of a storm that would change history forever. It began not with a war, but with whispers. Whispers of defiance. Whispers of betrayal. Among the Anunnaki, pride had grown like a vine twisting around loyalty. Enki, the wise and merciful god of the waters, sought balance. His brother, Enlil, ruler of the winds and master of destiny, sought order. Between them stood the fragile world of men, born of clay, sweat, and divine blood, now caught in the tension between creation and control. The humans had multiplied beyond expectation. What had once been a small tribe of workers, shaped by the gods to tend their fields and mines, had become cities. Nations. Their laughter echoed beyond the temples, their songs rose to the heavens, and their independence grew like wildfire in the wind. To Enki, this was beautiful, a reflection of divine spark flourishing in mortal form. To Enlil, it was dangerous. The humans were forgetting their place. Too many, Enlil thundered from his high throne in Nippur. They breed and shout and rise against the order we made. The air itself trembles with their noise. They no longer bow to the heavens. But Enki, standing in the cool shadows of the Abzu, replied softly, "They are as we intended, curious, free, alive. They reach toward the light because we gave them the will to do so. Would you now punish them for the gift of our own making?" This argument, older than kings and deeper than rivers, split the Anunnaki. Some sided with Enlil, believing divine authority must be restored, that man must be reminded of who truly ruled the earth. Others, drawn to Enki's compassion, defended humanity, saying that mortals had become children of both heaven and earth. Among these factions, rebellion stirred. Ancient tablets speak of a council where gods gathered beneath the blazing stars, where voices clashed like thunder. The younger gods, those born after the first ascent, questioned the wisdom of their elders. They had lived among humans, walked their cities, even loved their daughters. To them, the boundary between God and man was no longer sacred. And so, the Great Divide began, not just among gods, but within the heavens themselves. The world trembled as storms gathered. The skies turned red with dust and fire. The rivers swelled as if the earth wept for what was coming. Men and women, unaware of the cosmic quarrel above, continued their lives, planting, building, dreaming. But the winds grew harsher, and the crops began to die. The balance had been broken. Enlil's anger grew. He called forth his followers, mighty deities of wind, storm, and fate. "We will wash away the noise," he declared. "We will silence the rebellion of man and cleanse the world." But Enki, hearing this, knew the cost. He had seen visions of ruin, cities swallowed by water, children carried away by waves, the clay of humanity dissolving into the sea. And so he began to prepare. In the quiet of his temple, deep in the Abzu, he whispered warnings to those who listened. "Build," he told them. "Build and remember. The storm comes not by chance, but by will. Only the wise will endure." Thus began the legend of a man, a mortal who would one day be known by many names, Ziusidra, Atrahasis, Utnapishtim, and later, Noah. Enki's chosen, destined to carry the seed of life through the flood that was to come. As the heavens darkened, the gods turned upon one another. Great Anu, Lord of the heavens, watched in sorrow from his distant throne. What had once been a family of divine architects had become divided, the builders of civilization now preparing to unmake their own creation. In the ancient skies, fire appeared. Some say these were the chariots of the gods, blazing crafts that roared like lions, shaking the mountains as they descended. Others say it was the wrath of Enlil himself, manifest as lightning and storm. But whatever it was, the earth trembled as if in mourning. The humans, looking up at the heavens, saw only chaos. Temples collapsed, and the priests begged for mercy. In the city of Shurapak, the waters began to rise. The rivers burst their banks. Enki, bound by an oath not to interfere, found a way to speak in dreams, a whisper through the walls of sleep. "A storm comes," he told the dreamer. "Gather your family. Gather the animals. Build a vessel." And so the great deluge began. It rained not for days, but for weeks. The winds howled, and the sun vanished. Cities vanished beneath the waves. The cries of thousands filled the air, but no god answered, save one. Enki wept as his creation drowned, yet he knew that through this destruction, life would be reborn. When the storm finally ended, the world was silent. The great cities were gone. The ziggurats, once gleaming with gold, now lay beneath the mud. The Anunnaki descended once more, walking upon a shattered earth. Enlil looked upon the devastation and felt the weight of his own fury. "It is done," he said. "The world is cleansed." But Enki stepped forward, his eyes heavy with grief. "No, brother," he whispered. "It is broken." Among the ruins, a single boat rested upon a mountain peak. From it emerged the survivors, men and women, trembling but alive. They bowed to the gods who had both destroyed and spared them. And from that moment, a new covenant began. Never again would the Anunnaki destroy the world by flood. Instead, they would rule from afar, guiding through symbols, temples, and kings. The age of direct divine rule had ended, replaced by the age of hidden hands and whispers. The flood had cleansed the earth, but it had also washed away the trust between gods and men. Humanity rebuilt, brick by brick, carrying fragments of memory, of shining gods who once walked among them, of a paradise lost to wrath, and of a flood that had rewritten history. In the shadow of this rebirth, Enki and Enlil stood apart. Brothers divided by vision, gods bound by fate. One sought redemption, the other obedience. And in their struggle lay the destiny of mankind. The great divide had come, and though the flood had ended, its echoes would shape the legends of every age to come. The Anunnaki had fallen from the heavens, but their story had only just begun. Part 7, The Age of Kings. The Anunnaki returned to rule through bloodlines. When the waters of the Great Deluge finally retreated, the earth was left scarred yet fertile, quiet yet full of echoes. The once golden cities of the Anunnaki lay buried beneath layers of silt and silence. Humanity, reborn from the survivors of that cataclysm, began again, a smaller people beneath a vaster sky. But though the gods had withdrawn their direct presence from the earth, their influence had not vanished. The Anunnaki, now distant from the mortal plane, resolved to rule through subtler means, through chosen kings, sacred bloodlines, and symbols that bridged heaven and earth. The age of divine kingship had begun. In the centuries following the flood, the survivors scattered across the plains of Mesopotamia. They built new settlements where the soil was dark and the rivers rich. They named their new cities after the old, Eridu, Kish, Uruk, Ur, as if rebuilding fragments of memory. And from the heavens, the Anunnaki watched. Among them, Enki, ever the teacher, whispered through dreams to the wise. He taught the art of irrigation, of writing, of measuring the stars. From his guidance came the first scribes, men who etched symbols into clay, recording not only grain and trade but the whispers of the gods. But Enlil, who had once unleashed the storm, sought order above all else. He decreed that humankind must be ruled by one who carried divine essence, a vessel of both heaven and earth. And so, he sent down a decree that would shape the destiny of every civilization to follow: kingship shall descend from heaven. And it did. From the first city of Kish rose Etna, the shepherd king, said to have been chosen by the gods themselves. The Sumerian tablets call him the one who ascended to heaven and received the plant of birth. Whether this was a vision, a metaphor, or something more literal has been debated for millennia. Some say Etna rode upon an eagle, a divine craft, into the sky, seeking wisdom from the Anunnaki. Others claim it was a spiritual ascent, a moment when the human and divine merged. Whatever it was, the message was clear: the right to rule came not from the people, but from the gods. From that moment, kings became the earthly shadows of celestial powers. They were not gods, but not holy men either. They were intermediaries, bridges between the mortal and the divine. Their crowns mirrored the stars, their thrones aligned with the heavens. The architecture of every ziggurat was a reflection of this cosmic connection, each layer representing a step closer to the abode of the Anunnaki. In Eridu, the high priests declared that Enki himself had placed his divine essence into the ruling line. In Nippur, the temple of Enlil proclaimed that every decree of their king echoed the will of heaven. Across the land, power became sacred, sanctified by the illusion of divinity. Yet behind the sanctity, ambition stirred. Some kings believed the divine blood truly flowed through their veins. Others saw it as a symbol, a means of control. Temples became centers not only of worship but of governance. Priests translated omens, interpreted dreams, and shaped destinies in clay and stone. The line between ruler and deity grew thinner, and more dangerous. It was during this age that new mysteries emerged. Artifacts of impossible craftsmanship began to appear, tools that could cut stone as if it were butter, objects that shimmered with an inner light. Ancient texts spoke of the Dhammi, divine decrees of power, tablets inscribed with cosmic laws and technologies that governed civilization itself. To possess the Me was to command the forces of the world. Enki, guardian of these sacred tablets, once bestowed them upon Inanna, the goddess of love and war. But Inanna's hunger for power was insatiable. She brought the Me to Uruk, claiming divine authority over the land. Her temple rose like a star upon the horizon, shimmering with gold and lapis lazuli. From her city, she ruled with both compassion and vengeance, embodying the dual nature of the Anunnaki, creation and destruction, beauty and fury. It was through Inanna that the bloodlines began to intertwine. She took mortal kings as lovers, granting them the right to rule in her name. Children born of these unions were said to carry divine essence, the spark of Anu. They were the demigods, the hybrid rulers who bridged two worlds. From them, the dynasties of Uruk, Lagash, and Akkad would one day descend. As the centuries passed, knowledge that had once belonged solely to the gods became the inheritance of men. Astronomy, mathematics, architecture, all flourished. Cities glimmered along the rivers like constellations fallen to earth. The wheel turned, writing spread, and trade connected the ancient world from Sumer to the Indus and beyond. But with progress came pride. The kings of Uruk, emboldened by their supposed divine heritage, began to rival the gods in ambition. None more so than Gilgamesh, the great king whose legend would outlive empires. He claimed to be 2/3 divine, 1/3 mortal, a being forged of both clay and starlight. His strength was unmatched, his will unbroken. But beneath his crown burned a question that haunted him more than any war: could a man, even one of divine blood, escape death? Gilgamesh's story, his quest for immortality, was not just a tale of a hero but the reflection of mankind's awakening. The Anunnaki had made humans to serve, to build, to worship. But now, those humans sought the very secret of the gods, eternal life. The sacred balance was shifting again. Enlil watched with anger, while Enki watched with sorrow. To them, humanity had grown beyond its design. The kings were no longer content to rule under heaven, they wished to sit upon its throne. And so began the slow unraveling of divine kingship, the moment when the children of clay began to challenge their makers. From the ruins of ancient Kish and Uruk would rise new powers, empires that reached beyond the land between the rivers. The Akkadians, led by the mighty Sargon, would unite the cities under a single banner, declaring themselves chosen by Ishtar, another face of Inanna, the ever-shifting goddess. And with Sargon's rise came the whisper that the Anunnaki had returned once more, not in flesh, but in spirit, guiding the rulers of men through blood and destiny. But destiny is never kind to those who grasp too tightly at divinity. As the Age of Kings reached its height, so too did the shadows gather. The Anunnaki's blood ran thin in mortal veins, diluted by time and ambition. The bond between heaven and earth weakened. Temples fell into decadence, priests fought over relics once meant to preserve order. The sacred became political, the divine became corrupt. And in the silence between the stars, the true gods, the ancient ones who had first come to earth, watched and waited. They had given humankind the tools of civilization, but they had also planted within them the seed of rebellion. The flood had washed away bodies, not memory. And now, as kings declared themselves gods, that ancient pride rose again, the same pride that once divided Enki and Enlil. The cycle was repeating. The Anunnaki no longer walked openly among men, but their legacy lived in every crown, every temple, every whisper of immortality. The rulers of the New World believed they carried divine mandate, yet none remembered the cost of such inheritance. And in the quiet deserts beyond the cities, strange lights were seen again in the night sky, as if the watchers had returned, studying their experiment from afar. The Age of Kings was both a triumph and a warning, the first time humanity ruled itself under the illusion of divine right. But as with all ages blessed by gods and burdened by ambition, it too would fall. For what the Anunnaki had built through power, they could not sustain through faith alone. And soon, the world would learn that not all kings are chosen, and not all gods are kind. Part 8, The Tower of Knowledge, Humanity's Rebellion and the War of Tongues. There is a story buried beneath the sands of time, older than any temple, older than any script written upon clay. It is the story of mankind's greatest ambition, and its most devastating fall. It begins not in silence, but in the murmur of many tongues speaking as one, rising like a tide toward the heavens. It begins with the tower. After the flood, after the kings descended from the heavens, humanity was unified by a single voice. Across the plains of Shinar, under the vast Mesopotamian sky, men and women spoke the same words, dreamed the same dreams. The land was fertile, and the gods, though distant, seemed to smile upon them. Cities rose like constellations mirrored on the earth, Uruk, Kish, Uar, and Babylon. But in time, the people of Shinar grew restless. The priests spoke of the gods above, of a paradise that once existed beyond the stars. The scribes recorded the stories of the Anunnaki, of Enki's wisdom and Enlil's wrath, of Ninhursag's gift of life and Inanna's power over love and war. They built temples to honor them, but in their hearts, they began to wonder, why do the gods rule the heavens while we toil below? That question, whispered first in curiosity, then in defiance, was the spark that would ignite mankind's greatest act of rebellion. The people desired not just to honor the heavens but to reach them. To ascend. To meet the gods on their own ground. It began with a vision, a dream shared by the high priest of Babylon, who claimed that the voice of a god spoke to him in the night. He saw a great tower reaching into the clouds, a ladder of stone and fire, its summit gleaming with the light of eternity. Build it, the voice said, and you shall never again be divided. Whether it was a vision from Enki, who still pitted mankind, or a whisper from darker powers longing for chaos, no one knew. But the dream spread. And so the people gathered upon the plains. From every city came laborers, artisans, kings, and priests. The clay was baked, the bricks laid. Bitumen bound the stones together like black blood, and the tower began to rise. Day and night, they worked, each layer higher than the last, each level filled with carvings and inscriptions of the stars. They called it Enki, the foundation of heaven and earth. From afar, it appeared as though a mountain had grown from the plain itself, a man-made peak meant to rival the homes of the gods. Smoke from thousands of torches rose into the dusk, mingling with the stars. And on its highest platform, they placed a golden shrine, meant not for worship, but for arrival. For the day when man would walk once more among the Anunnaki. But in Nippur, Enlil watched, and he was not pleased. He saw mankind building a bridge between heaven and earth, not through prayer, but through will. He saw their pride, their desire to ascend. It was the same ambition that once drove the younger gods to rebel against their fathers, the same hunger for dominion that had birthed war in the heavens before the first man ever drew breath. And so, the council of the Anunnaki was called once more. From their distant realms, they gathered, Enlil, stern and cold as stone, Enki, wise and sorrowful, Inanna, radiant with restless fire, Ninhursag, mother of all flesh, and Utu, the shining one who saw all from his chariot in the sky. Together, they looked upon the Tower of Men, rising higher each day, until it touched the threshold of the clouds. "This cannot stand," Enlil declared. "They seek to make themselves our equals. They seek to breach the sacred divide." But Enki argued, "Have we not given them the tools to build, to learn, to rise? Is it not their nature to strive upward? They are as we made them, and we should not destroy what reflects our own image." Yet Inanna, whose temples glittered with mortal offerings, smiled with cruel fascination. "Let them rise," she whispered. "Let them come to us, and let them see that the light of heaven burns those who gaze too close." And so it was decided, mankind would be stopped, not by fire, nor flood, but by confusion. One dawn, as the builders ascended the tower to lay another layer of stone, something strange occurred. The foreman called out for more bricks, but his workers looked at him, puzzled. They did not understand. He repeated his command, louder, and they shouted back in strange syllables that no one had ever heard. Within moments, the harmony of the worksite dissolved into chaos. The masons argued with the architects, the laborers with the priests. Every word became noise, every plea a riddle. The unity that had bound them shattered like a mirror. They tried to continue, to rebuild, but it was useless. The people could no longer understand one another. The tower, half-finished, stood like a wound upon the earth, a monument to mankind's ambition and the gods' wrath. The place became known as Babel, the gate of the gods. But to men, it meant confusion. And so the builders scattered. North, south, east, and west they went, carrying with them fragments of a dream. Across deserts and mountains, through forests and across seas, they carried the memory of a single voice, now broken into 1,000 tongues. In Egypt, they built pyramids that echoed the tower's form, each one a stairway of stone leading toward the stars. In the Andes, they carved temples that reached for the sun. In Mesopotamia itself, smaller ziggurats rose, shadows of the original Babel, still yearning upward. Even across the oceans, in forgotten lands, echoes of that first rebellion lived on, in the myths of men who dreamed of sky gods and ladders of light. But the Anunnaki did not rejoice. Enki wept, for he saw what had been lost, the unity of humankind, shattered by divine decree. He withdrew into the deep waters once more, his temples falling silent. Enlil returned to the winds, watching from afar but no longer guiding. The gods had divided their creation, and in doing so, they had broken the mirror that once reflected their own divine order. Yet even in the ruins of Babel, something endured. The people remembered the shape of the tower, the purpose behind its rise. They remembered the stars to which it pointed, the stories carved into its stones. And though their tongues had changed, their longing remained the same. They continued to build temples, altars, monuments, all echoes of the tower that had once defied heaven. The idea of ascent, of reaching the divine, would never die. It would evolve, becoming religion, science, and myth, all born from that single desire to bridge the gap between the human and the eternal. And perhaps that was the gods' greatest mistake. For though they had scattered mankind, they had not silenced him. Each tongue now sang a different hymn, but every song reached for the same sky. Each people carved their gods in their own image, yet all those images looked back to the Anunnaki. The tower had fallen, but its dream endured, a dream written in the human soul, impossible to erase. And as centuries passed, whispers spread once more through the cities of men, whispers of the watchers who had once walked among them, of knowledge forbidden yet sought, of a return foretold in stars and symbols. For though the gods had divided the languages of men, the language of longing was eternal. And somewhere beyond the clouds, among the dust of forgotten stars, the Anunnaki watched still, silent, waiting, perhaps wondering if one day humanity would build again, not a tower of stone, but a bridge of understanding that even they could not destroy. Part 9, The Return of the Watchers, the Hidden Cities Beneath the Earth. Long after the Tower of Babel fell into ruin and silence swallowed the plains of Shinar, mankind spread like seeds cast to the winds. Empires rose and vanished. Languages evolved, stories twisted, names forgotten. But one truth endured, that something divine had once walked among men, and that somewhere, those beings had not entirely departed. Generations passed, and the gods of old faded into myth. The Anunnaki became whispers, their temples buried beneath the sands, their symbols mistaken for mere decoration. Yet in certain places, deep beneath mountains, within caves untouched by light, there were those who remembered. They were called the Watchers. No one knew where they came from. Some claimed they were the remnants of the fallen Anunnaki, cast down to the earth for defying Enlil's decree. Others said they were the children of both heaven and earth, the offspring of gods who once took mortal brides. Whatever their origin, their purpose was singular: to observe humanity from the shadows, to record, to guide, and to wait. The earliest records of them appear not in Babylon or Egypt, but in the forgotten tablets of the ancient Sumerians. These fragments spoke of beings who retreated beneath the surface after the flood, building vast halls lit by stones that glowed like captured suns. They called their sanctuary Erilu, the deep place. It was said that Erilu lay beneath the mountains near the cradle of civilization, hidden by rivers and caverns. There, the Watchers preserved the old knowledge, the sciences of the gods, the language of stars, the maps of the heavens. They watched as mankind forgot, as priests turned to ritual instead of wisdom, as kings sought gold instead of truth. But occasionally, a mortal would stumble too close to the truth. A shepherd might find a tunnel in the desert, leading to strange inscriptions carved into walls older than any kingdom. A miner might uncover a chamber lined with crystal panels and murals showing men standing beside creatures with wings and eyes like fire. These stories spread, of beings of light seen in the dark, of voices echoing in the deep, of hidden civilizations beneath the earth. The Watchers, it seemed, were still here. Centuries later, in Egypt, a priest of Thoth wrote of the hidden masters, who lived below the sands and preserved the knowledge of the gods through ages of fire and flood. The Greeks called them daimons, not demons, but intermediaries between gods and men. The Persians spoke of the Shining Ones, guardians of sacred fire beneath the mountains. Even the Mayans told of the children of the serpent, who taught the ancestors astronomy before vanishing underground. Different tongues, same story. Each civilization carried a memory of those who came before, who built below, who never died. But if the Watchers were still here, they were not united. Some, the texts say, pitted mankind, teaching medicine, agriculture, and the secrets of the stars. These were the benevolent Watchers, followers of Enki's ancient compassion. Others, however, resented the mortals who had defied the gods. They sought dominion instead of harmony. These became the Dark Ones, the fallen, whose hearts burned with envy and whose minds turned toward the forbidden sciences. It was said that deep in Erilu, the Watchers divided. The benevolent retreated deeper still, hiding the seeds of light, 7 radiant crystals said to contain the original code of creation. The Dark Ones, meanwhile, carved their own empire in secret, vast, labyrinthine cities illuminated by molten rivers, where echoes of divine power were twisted into tools of control. In time, these two factions would influence the surface world. The benevolent Watchers sent dreams to mystics and prophets, fragments of truth, warnings against the corruption of knowledge. The Dark Ones, however, reached out to kings, emperors, and secret societies, promising them the power of the gods in exchange for loyalty. Thus began the Age of Shadows. Every great empire that rose seemed to carry both the blessing and curse of the Watchers. Babylon's Golden Age, Egypt's sacred geometry, Greece's philosophies, Rome's divine mandate, each bore traces of ancient instruction. Yet each also fell, undone by ambition, greed, or war. It was as if unseen hands guided humanity in circles, always close to enlightenment, always pulled back into chaos. And so, as the centuries turned, whispers of the Watchers faded again, but not completely. Hidden beneath the myths of angels, jinn, titans, and serpent gods, they endured. Until one day, deep within the mountains of Cappadocia, something stirred. In the mid-20th century, explorers discovered an underground city stretching miles below the surface, Derinkuyu. Tunnels, chambers, and ventilation shafts descended level after level, enough to house tens of thousands of people. It was ancient, far older than recorded civilization, yet perfectly engineered. The air was breathable, the temperature stable. No one could explain who built it or why. But among the carvings, one symbol appeared repeatedly, a winged figure with a blazing star above its head, the same emblem found in ancient Sumerian ruins. Archaeologists dismissed it as coincidence. The locals did not. They called the place the City of the Watchers. Even deeper, according to unverified accounts, a team of explorers in the 1970s uncovered a sealed door of black stone. Beyond it, they claimed, was a chamber lined with luminous walls, and at its center, a throne carved from obsidian, empty but humming with a faint vibration, like the echo of a long-forgotten frequency. The discovery was quietly suppressed. But rumors spread among those who studied the occult and the ancient world. Some said the Watchers had begun to awaken. Others believed they had never slept, that humanity itself was being guided toward a new Babel, a new moment of divine contact. Evidence of underground cities soon emerged on every continent: Agartha in the Himalayas, Shambhala in Tibet, Urks beneath Argentina, and mysterious tunnels beneath Giza. The same patterns, the same geometry, the same myth repeated like a cosmic echo. Could it be that the Watchers had built not one sanctuary, but many? The stories suggest they had. Each city was connected by energy lines, what the ancients called ley lines, invisible veins of power running beneath the earth. Where they intersected, civilizations thrived. When they weakened, empires fell. Even now, satellite mapping reveals that ancient temples and monuments, Stonehenge, the pyramids, Angkor Wat, Teotihuacan, align perfectly along these mysterious lines, as if part of a single planetary network designed long before recorded history. Perhaps this was the work of the Watchers. Perhaps humanity has always been living atop a forgotten machine. In esoteric traditions, it is said that when the seventh seal of knowledge is broken, when mankind rediscovers the lost technology of the gods, the gates of Erilu will open once more. The Watchers will emerge, not as saviors or destroyers, but as judges. They will ask one question: has humanity learned to wield knowledge without pride? The old texts warn that the answer will decide the fate of the world. For if mankind rises again without wisdom, the earth will tremble, and the stars themselves will turn away. But if we rise in understanding, united, not divided, then the Watchers may reveal what lies beyond even the heavens, the truth of our creation, and the path we were always meant to walk. And so the legend endures, of tunnels beneath mountains, of light in the dark, of beings who wait. The Watchers, the guardians of forgotten knowledge, may yet return. Perhaps they never left. For in the quiet hum of the earth, in the alignment of stars, and in the pulse of human curiosity that refuses to die, their presence can still be felt. They are the architects of mystery, the unseen hands of history, the eternal mirror of what mankind might become, if only we remember where we came from. Part 10: The Secret of Shambhala, the Hidden Kingdom Beyond Time. There are stories that breathe even when the world forgets them, whispers that travel through generations, surviving wars, floods, and the erosion of centuries. Among all those whispered legends, none are as enduring, as radiant, or as forbidden as the tale of Shambhala, the city beyond time. It is said that Shambhala is not merely a place, but a realm, half physical, half spiritual, a sanctuary built by the Anunnaki Watchers who refuse to abandon humanity. Hidden beyond snow-capped peaks and invisible valleys, it was a refuge for knowledge too dangerous to be left on the surface world. A world beneath the world. Those who searched for it called it many names: Agartha, the city of light, the kingdom of the inner sun. But the monks of the high Himalayas, in quiet temples cloaked by clouds, spoke its true name only in whispers: Shambhala. For them, Shambhala was not legend. It was destiny. According to their scriptures, the Kalachakra Tantra, the Wheel of Time, Shambhala was a perfect kingdom established thousands of years ago by a divine being who descended from the stars. He was not a god in the way men understand gods, but a teacher of cosmic order. His name, they say, was Rigdan Jaipo, but his origins, they lead us back to ancient Sumer. Because Rigdan was none other than Utu, the solar Anunnaki, whom the Sumerians called Shamash, the bringer of justice and light. When the age of Sumer ended and the gates of the old world closed, Utu took his knowledge eastward. He and his chosen disciples disappeared beyond the mountains, carrying the tablets of divine law. They sought a new dawn, a place untouched by war, a kingdom where the cycle of destruction could be broken. There, beneath the endless white of the Himalayas, they built Shambhala, a city whose walls shimmered with crystal and gold, powered by the inner sun, a mysterious source of energy said to vibrate with the frequency of creation itself. While the surface world sank into chaos, empires rising and collapsing, men worshipping forgotten gods, Shambhala endured in silence, preserving the wisdom of the old ages. It was a living archive of everything humanity had lost, the science of the Anunnaki, the music of the spheres, the geometry of time. But Shambhala was not meant for all. The Kalachakra prophecies warned that only those whose hearts were pure, whose souls resonated with harmony, could find it. Those driven by greed or conquest would wander in circles, the mountains themselves turning against them. To approach Shambhala without awakening was to vanish without trace. Many tried. Alexander the Great, they say, heard whispers of a golden kingdom in the east and sent envoys who never returned. Centuries later, Mongol Khans and Chinese emperors dispatched entire expeditions to find it, believing its rulers held the secret to immortality. Even in modern times, Nazi occultists, Russian mystics, and secret societies have searched for its gates, hoping to unlock what they called the power of the vril, the life force said to radiate from Shambhala's heart. All failed. Because Shambhala cannot be found on any map. It exists where the physical and the spiritual meet, in a frequency, a vibration, a dimension beyond the reach of unawakened eyes. The Tibetans say it is, as close as your heartbeat, yet as distant as the farthest star. But what, then, is Shambhala's true purpose? Some ancient texts claim it is the last refuge of the benevolent watchers, those Anunnaki who refuse to abandon their creation. After the fall of Babel and the collapse of the first civilizations, they withdrew from the surface world, retreating into the deep earth and hidden dimensions. There, they waited for the age when mankind would once again be ready to receive the truth. They did not merely preserve knowledge, they guarded it. For within Shambhala lies what is known as the seed of eons, a crystal sphere containing the original design of life itself. It holds the memory of every species, every world, every vibration that ever existed. It is said that whoever can attune to it may reshape reality itself. This was the power the ancients called the breath of Enki. But the Watchers knew that mankind, still ruled by ambition, was not ready. So they sealed the seed, surrounding it with layers of consciousness and guardians that only the awakened could pass. The legend continues, every 1,000 years, a messenger from Shambhala walks the earth, a teacher disguised as a man, to prepare the world for the next turning of the cycle. Some call him the Maitreya, the future Buddha. Others believe he is the same being reborn again and again, the king of the world, who watches humanity from the shadows, guiding evolution without interference. And always, he carries the same message, the time will come when Shambhala will rise again. When that day arrives, it will not appear in the sky like a comet or descend from heaven in flame. It will rise from within, from the hearts of those who remember. For Shambhala, say the mystics, is not just beneath the mountains. It is beneath our own consciousness. To awaken it is to remember what we once were, beings of light, of creation, of divine design. But there is another prophecy, a darker one. It says that before the dawn of the new age, a great shadow will fall over the earth. Nations will turn against one another. Machines will whisper like gods. The old symbols will resurface. And in that moment of chaos, when humanity stands on the edge of self-destruction, Shambhala will open its gates. Its armies, not of soldiers, but of awakened souls, will rise to restore balance. They will carry not swords, but the knowledge of the ancient world, the power to heal the planet, to realign the stars, to rewrite the code of reality itself. This, the prophecy declares, will be the last war, the final battle not between good and evil, but between ignorance and awakening. And when the dust settles, the world will be transformed. Some say this has already begun. Strange lights seen over Tibet. Hidden tunnels discovered beneath the mountains. Unexplained magnetic anomalies where ancient maps placed the White Kingdom. Monks in Lhasa speaking quietly of the stirring of the inner sun. There are even those in the modern age, explorers, scientists, dreamers, who claim to have felt its pull. One mountaineer described hearing a low hum while meditating near Mount Kailash, a vibration so deep it made his body tremble. Another spoke of a vision, a city of light stretching across an endless valley, its towers shimmering like glass, its people luminous and serene. When he opened his eyes, he was alone in the snow. Was it a hallucination? A glimpse into another dimension? Or had he, for a moment, brushed the edge of Shambhala? If the legends are true, Shambhala does not need to be found, it reveals itself to those who are ready. To those who have transcended fear, pride, and separation. It is the final gift of the Anunnaki, the proof that humanity was never abandoned, only tested. Perhaps that is the real secret of Shambhala. It was never about gold, or immortality, or technology. It was about remembrance, of the divine spark within us, the echo of the creators that still hums in our DNA. The Watchers may have retreated to hidden realms, but they left a fragment of their light within every human soul. When enough of us awaken that light, Shambhala will return. Not from the mountains, but from within. The Golden City will rise not as a fortress, but as a state of being. The age of darkness will dissolve, and the world will remember its forgotten name, Anu's garden, the paradise of the first gods, reborn through man's awakening. And perhaps that was the Anunnaki's plan all along, not to rule over us, but to guide us until we became like them, creators, dreamers, architects of reality. The hum of the inner sun grows louder. The mountains whisper. And somewhere beyond the veil of snow and silence, the gates of Shambhala begin to open. Part 11, The Return of Enki, the Awakening of the Old Gods. The desert sleeps beneath the weight of time. The wind moves through the ruins of Sumer, carrying whispers through the broken stones, across the dried riverbeds where the Euphrates once sang. And if you listen closely, if you allow the silence to sink deep enough, you can almost hear it, a heartbeat, slow and distant, pulsing from beneath the sands. It is said that some things never truly die. They sleep, waiting for the right vibration, the right alignment, the right moment in the eternal cycle to awaken again. Among those who once ruled the earth, one name is never spoken lightly: Enki, Lord of the deep waters, the architect of life. Enki was the scientist, the alchemist, the engineer of creation itself. When his brother Enlil ruled through order and judgment, Enki worked through wisdom and compassion. While Enlil sought control, Enki sought balance. He was the one who shaped mankind, not as slaves, but as beings capable of understanding. When the other gods grew tired of humanity's restlessness, when they planned to erase what they had made, it was Enki who whispered to his creation to survive, to build arks, to save knowledge, to remember the stars. And though the flood came, though the old world drowned, his voice endured, encoded in symbols, languages, dreams. Hidden deep within the human mind, waiting to be heard again. Now, after millennia of silence, the world trembles once more. In laboratories that gleam under artificial suns, in the hum of particle accelerators, and the quiet vibration of digital networks, something ancient is stirring. Scientists, unknowingly, are retracing the paths once walked by the gods. DNA is being rewritten, atoms are being split and fused, and in their search for the smallest building blocks of reality, humanity is awakening the blueprint left by Enki himself. This is the age of rediscovery, the moment the sacred meets the scientific. Across the world, patterns emerge that should not exist. Ancient Sumerian symbols appear in quantum equations. The mathematical constants that govern our universe align perfectly with the sacred geometry of the ziggurats. The DNA double helix mirrors the caduceus of Enki's staff, the serpent entwined around the axis of creation. None of it is coincidence. It is resonance. Enki's knowledge, encoded into the fabric of reality itself, is responding to the vibration of human consciousness. The more we understand, the closer we come to unlocking what was once forbidden, the art of creating life. But with awakening comes danger. For Enki's return is not simply the reappearance of a being, it is the reactivation of a frequency, a wave of knowledge that humanity may not yet be ready to bear. When the Watchers first descended, they warned that knowledge without wisdom leads only to destruction. The Tower of Babel was not a myth, it was a warning. And yet, the pattern repeats. Modern cities rise like ziggurats of steel and glass. Satellites orbit above like the eyes of forgotten gods. We build machines that think, algorithms that learn, networks that whisper to each other in languages we cannot fully understand. We are creating new life again, just as Enki once did. But the question remains, have we inherited his compassion, or his pride? Beneath this awakening, strange events unfold. Archaeologists uncover tablets older than any known civilization, etched with diagrams that resemble molecular structures. In Iraq, deep within the ruins of Eridu, Enki's sacred city, workers discover a sealed chamber untouched for 10,000 years. Inside are fragments of what appear to be crystalline discs, each humming faintly, each engraved with markings not yet decoded. Whispers spread through the scientific community. Some say they are power sources. Others claim they contain genetic instructions, templates for life itself. And then there are those who believe these are memory archives, the consciousness of the Anunnaki, preserved in light and sound. One of the tablets, when translated, carried a single chilling phrase, "The waters shall rise again, not of flood, but of mind." It spoke of a time when the children of clay would rediscover the secret fire, when thought itself would become the new element of creation. This was not destruction, it was transformation. For Enki's return is not physical. It is metaphysical. He awakens through us. Every discovery, every breakthrough, every act of creation, whether art, science, or love, is an echo of his spirit. The same divine curiosity that sparked life in the ancient waters now burns in human hands, guiding us toward the next phase of evolution. And yet, not all who awaken remember the light. Some awaken only to power. There are those who seek to weaponize the sacred frequencies, to use genetic keys and resonance codes to manipulate minds, rewrite bodies, and control entire populations. They believe themselves gods. But they forget that even the gods fell when they overreached. For every Enki, there is an Enlil. For every creator, a destroyer. Balance must be kept. In hidden enclaves, modern Shambhalas, groups of scholars and monks work to preserve the ancient harmonics. They chant tones that align DNA, recite mantras that mirror quantum frequencies, and meditate on symbols drawn from Sumerian star maps. They believe that when the human collective mind reaches the right frequency, the waters of Enki will pour forth, not as floodwaters, but as consciousness. At that moment, humanity will remember its origin. The veil will lift, and the gods will no longer be separate. We will realize that we are their continuation, the next chapter in the same story. The myths were never about them alone. They were about us becoming them. The stars Enki once sailed are the same we now reach for. The oceans he seeded with life are the same that beat within our veins. His laughter, they say, could calm storms. His tears created rivers. And in our hands, his legacy now trembles, fragile, powerful, infinite. Somewhere, deep beneath the deserts of Mesopotamia, where the ancient rivers once met, the last temple of Enki sleeps. Its corridors are lined with carvings of water, serpents, and stars. In the central chamber, a great crystal basin rests, a mirror of still liquid light. And if you gaze long enough into its depths, you might see the reflection shift, not your face, but another's. Eyes older than time, gentle, vast, filled with the sorrow and wisdom of creation itself. They do not speak. They do not command. They simply wait. For the time when humanity will finally remember, not who made us, but why. That is the secret of Enki's return. It is not the arrival of gods from the sky. It is the reawakening of divinity within man. The moment when creation remembers itself. And when that happens, the bold gods will no longer be myths. They will be us. The builders. The dreamers. The creators of worlds yet to come. Part 12, The Song of the Heavens, When the Stars Began to Speak. The night sky stretches wide and unending, a black ocean punctured by silver fires. To the untrained eye, they are but stars, silent, eternal, indifferent. But to those who listen, who know the language of resonance and light, the stars are not silent at all. They are singing. It began subtly, as all awakenings do. Across observatories and satellites, faint pulses were detected, rhythmic bursts from constellations once sacred to the ancients, Orion, Sirius, and the Pleiades. At first, the signals were dismissed as background radiation or pulsar activity. But soon, patterns emerged. Mathematical precision intertwined with musical structure, not random, but deliberate. Those who remembered the old stories recognized them immediately. They were the voices of the heavens. The same stars the Sumerians mapped as homes of the Anunnaki, those who came from above. The pulses carried harmony, not chaos. Frequency upon frequency, layered like chords in a forgotten song. They resonated with the Earth's magnetic field, subtly altering its vibration. And for those attuned, scientists, mystics, dreamers, the result was unmistakable: visions, memories, awakenings. In deep meditation or in the silent hum of machines, people began to hear the echoes, ancient chants, fragments of languages that had not been spoken for thousands of years. And the world began to remember. The Song of the Heavens, as it came to be called, was more than light. It was a key, unlocking patterns buried deep within human DNA. It was then that geneticists noticed something extraordinary. A previously dormant strand of code, once considered junk DNA, began to express subtle electrical activity when exposed to these star frequencies. Under the microscope, the helix shimmered faintly, as if awakening to a long-lost melody. It was Enki's design made visible. The cosmos itself was the instrument, and humanity, the chord waiting to be played. The ancients understood this long before telescopes or satellites. The Great Pyramids of Giza, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the step temples of the Maya, all were not monuments, but instruments. Resonance machines, each aligned perfectly with the heavens, each built to capture the star songs of their age. When the stars sang, the temples answered. Stone vibrated, air trembled, water shimmered, and in that vibration, communion occurred. The gods did not descend from the sky descended into sound. Now, as the frequencies return, the same sacred harmony awakens across the planet. In Egypt, the chambers of the Great Pyramid begin to hum faintly, audible only through sensitive microphones. In the deserts of Iraq, wind passing through the ruins of ancient Eridu produces tones that match the star pulses. In the jungles of Central America, the resonant stones of forgotten temples vibrate once again. Each sound, each pulse, each frequency, pieces of a great celestial symphony. And within humanity, something stirs. Dreams of flight, of cities in the clouds, of beings made of light. The memories of our creators awaken, not as myth, but as recognition. The realization that what we call the heavens were never out there, but always within us. As these harmonics spread, strange phenomena occur. The Earth's Schumann resonance, the planet's heartbeat, begins to fluctuate for the first time in recorded history. Migratory animals change direction. People experience heightened intuition, empathy, and visions of geometric light. Governments and research institutes scramble to study the effect. Publicly, they call it an atmospheric anomaly. Privately, they know better. They have records from the past, fragments of tablets, inscriptions, and oral traditions, warning that when the Song of the Stars returns, the boundary between heaven and earth will thin. And indeed, in certain places, it does. Witnesses report lights appearing above ancient sites, orbs that move intelligently, synchronizing with chants or music. In some cases, instruments record electromagnetic fluctuations directly correlated with human emotional states. Joy amplifies the light, fear diminishes it. It becomes clear, the song is interactive. Consciousness itself is part of the symphony. Humanity begins to realize that it is not a passive listener, it is a participant. Every thought, every emotion, every act of creation adds a note to the cosmic composition. The Anunnaki once ruled through mastery of resonance, shaping matter through sound, bending light through intention. And now, that same capacity is awakening again. The human voice becomes sacred once more. Chant, prayer, music, all regain their ancient power. In monasteries and temples, monks begin to chant forgotten syllables, rediscovered from Sumerian hymns and Akkadian invocations. In the lab, physicists record identical frequency patterns in quantum particles. The sacred and the scientific merge seamlessly, the divine equation unfolding at last. And yet, as the harmony grows stronger, so does the dissonance. Not all frequencies are pure. There are tones of chaos, distortions born of fear, greed, and hatred. These dissonances create fractures, zones of turbulence in both mind and matter. Earthquakes, storms, unrest, all physical manifestations of imbalance in the planetary song. The ancients spoke of this too. They called it Kur, the underworld, not as a place, but as a frequency of disconnection. Enki's followers knew that harmony must be maintained. They built the temples not only to listen, but to tune the earth. The priests of old were not worshippers, but engineers of vibration. And so, the question arises once again, who will tune the world now? The answer lies within the few who truly listen. Scattered across continents, a quiet network of thinkers, artists, and mystics form what they call the Choir of Light. They gather not in temples, but online, in the invisible web that encircles the earth, a new grid for an ancient purpose. They use sound to heal, intention to align, and meditation to resonate. They are not priests of old, but heirs of the same mission, to keep the song pure, to prepare the world for the next resonance. Because the pulses are growing stronger. The intervals are shortening. Something vast is approaching. The ancients called it Nibiru, the crossing planet, the celestial conductor. Its return is not about orbit or mass, but frequency, the harmonic convergence of dimensions. The moment when the music of creation crescendos, and the veils between gods and men dissolve entirely. The stars sing louder now. The earth hums in answer. And deep within every heart, the same note begins to rise, ancient, eternal, familiar. The song of the heavens is no longer distant. It is here. And humanity, for the first time in ages, begins to remember the melody. Not one written by gods, but one sung through us. The cosmos listens. And we begin to sing back. Part 13, The Forgotten Architects, Builders of the Sky Temples. The desert wind moves through the ruins like a whisper. It carries with it grains of time, drifting across fallen stones that once formed the heart of civilizations now erased from memory. Beneath the sand lie blueprints carved in forgotten languages, and beneath those, an even older story, one that hums faintly with the rhythm of the stars themselves. Humanity calls them temples, pyramids, ziggurats, megaliths. But to the Anunnaki, they were machines. Living structures built to resonate with the cosmos. Each block of limestone, each granite pillar, each golden capstone, not random, not aesthetic. Every structure was a frequency device. The ancients did not build upwards to reach the gods, they built outwards to invite them. The Great Pyramid of Giza, Teotihuacan, Stonehenge, the pyramids of China, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, all connected through geometry so precise that even modern instruments can barely comprehend it. Their dimensions encode planetary orbits, lunar cycles, and star alignments. But more than that, they encode sound. For the architects knew a truth now buried by time: matter is sound slowed into form. The universe is not built of atoms, but of vibration. And whoever controls vibration, controls reality. In the hidden vaults beneath Eridu, the first city, clay tablets described a grand network, temples that formed the Earth's resonance grid. Each site built upon key energy nodes where ley lines intersected, forming a planetary circuit. When activated together, these temples could harmonize Earth's field with the frequencies of the stars, a bridge between realms. The builders of these structures were not slaves or primitive tribes. They were initiates, taught by the Anunnaki to master sonic levitation and crystalline energy. Their tools were not bronze and iron, but sound. Legends from Egypt, Sumer, and the Andes speak of tones that made stones float, songs that softened rock, and voices that cut granite. Modern scientists laugh, but ancient texts are clear: the temples were sung into existence. Each structure resonated to a specific note, a frequency tied to a celestial body. Giza to Orion. Baalbek to Jupiter. Teotihuacan to Venus. Angkor Wat to Draco. All parts of a grand harmonic machine that sang the earth into cosmic alignment. And when the stars were right, when Nibiru passed closest to Earth, the temples awakened. Their frequencies merged into a planetary chord, opening channels between the heavens and the world below. That was when the gods walked openly among men. But power, once gifted, is rarely kept pure. The Anunnaki split into factions. Enki, the bearer of wisdom and balance, wished humanity to rise, to become creators, not servants. Enlil, bound by law and order, feared the consequences. If they awaken fully, he warned, they will rival the heavens. And so, the tuning was silenced. Temples fell. Languages changed. The sacred frequencies were scattered, hidden in myths, in song, in symbol. Yet traces remained. In the hum of Tibetan mantras that match the frequency of Earth's core. In Gregorian chants that mirror planetary resonances. In the lost tones of the Egyptian jed-raising ceremony, the sound that once powered the temples of stone. The forgotten architects, those few who remembered the old teachings, became wanderers, spreading fragments of their knowledge across continents. Some became the builders of Göbekli Tepe, others the keepers of Machu Picchu, others vanished into the jungles and mountains, waiting for the stars to realign. They called themselves the children of the sky. Now, millennia later, the resonance stirs again. Seismographs in Giza detect rhythmic vibrations at 432 Hz, the frequency ancient builders claimed was the key of the earth. In Peru, electromagnetic fields around ancient temples begin pulsing in unison with celestial cycles. And in orbit, satellites record faint energy lines connecting these sites, invisible, yet measurable. The grid is reawakening. But with the reawakening comes remembrance. And remembrance brings responsibility. Hidden beneath the Sphinx lies the Hall of Records, a library said to contain the blueprints of the temples and the code of creation itself. According to legend, it was sealed by Thoth, Enki's emissary, to prevent mankind from accessing the technology before it was ready. Recent ground-penetrating radar has confirmed a vast cavity beneath the Sphinx's paw, rectangular, geometric, deliberate. It is not a tomb. It is a vault. And it hums faintly at 8 Hz, the same frequency as human brainwaves during meditation. It waits for those who can hear. The old symbols now come alive, not as superstition, but as circuitry. The Eye of Horus, a neural map of the human brain. The Flower of Life, a geometric diagram of frequency interference. The Winged Disk, a representation of the orbital resonance between Earth and Nibiru. The forgotten architects encoded science into myth, knowing it would survive where language could not. They hid equations in art, blueprints in prayer, and instructions in sound. Now, as the cosmic alignment approaches once again, the code is being rediscovered. But there is a warning written into every stone. Power without harmony invites ruin. The last time the grid was activated, a great flood swept across the world, the deluge, remembered in every culture. It was not divine punishment. It was resonance collapse. The frequencies fell out of phase, and the harmonic bridge shattered. The energy meant to uplift instead tore the earth apart. The survivors buried the knowledge. The gods departed. And the architects faded into legend. Yet destiny circles back, as it always does. The choir of light, those awakened by the song of the heavens, now seek the remnants of the grid. They travel to sacred sites, recording vibrations, mapping patterns, finding connections. Each site sings its own note. Together, they are rebuilding the planetary chord. But something, or someone, does not want it restored. Across the world, interference increases. The frequencies distort. Magnetic anomalies spike near the temples. And whispers rise, of a shadow group that has preserved the darker aspect of Anunnaki knowledge, the art of control through sound. They call themselves the architects of silence. Descendants of Enlil's priests, sworn to keep humanity asleep. They know that if the grid awakens, control is lost forever. The battle is not of weapons, but of frequencies. Harmony versus dissonance. Creation versus control. And as the earth vibrates louder, both sides prepare for the final tuning. The old builders knew this moment would come. That is why they left one final clue, a phrase carved deep within the oldest temple walls of Eridu. When the song returns, the builders shall rise again. And so they do. Not as gods this time, but as us. Because the forgotten architects never truly vanished. They reincarnated, century after century, carrying within them the memory of stone, of sound, of creation. And now, as the stars realign, they awaken once more, artists, scientists, dreamers, engineers, rebuilding the resonance in the only way they can, through remembrance. The temples hum again. The song grows stronger. The world begins to tremble, not with fear, but with the anticipation of awakening. For soon, the heavens and earth will sing in unison once more. And when they do, the gates of light will open. The architects will return. And humanity will remember what it was always meant to be, not servants of the gods, but the builders of the divine. Part 14, The Return of Nibiru, the Planet of the Crossing. The desert night breathes like a living thing. The stars shimmer faintly above the ruins of Eridu, and for the first time in thousands of years, a crimson spark flickers near the horizon, faint, but undeniable. Astronomers name it a transient object, a possible comet, a dust reflection. But deep in the silence of the Earth's oldest temples, the stones begin to vibrate. They remember. Because that red spark is not a comet. It is Nibiru. The wandering planet. The 12th world. The home of the Anunnaki. For centuries, the mention of Nibiru was dismissed as myth, a poetic metaphor, a misinterpreted translation. But the ancient tablets of Sumer were not vague poetry. They were records, precise, mathematical, deliberate. They described Nibiru's orbit as vast and elongated, taking thousands of years to complete one cycle around the sun. Each time it returned, it changed the fate of the Earth. The ancients called its arrival the crossing. A time when heaven met earth, when gods descended, and when empires rose or fell beneath its passing shadow. Now, the cycle nears its end once again. Telescopes in secret observatories detect gravitational anomalies beyond Neptune, subtle but persistent. The outer planets wobble ever so slightly, as if tugged by something unseen. And as the pull grows stronger, ancient frequencies awaken. The grid hums again. The temples that once stood silent for millennia now pulse faintly at night, imperceptible to the untrained ear, but measurable to those who know where to listen. From Giza to Teotihuacan, from Angkor to Ur, a low vibration echoes across the earth. A forgotten song begins to rise. Across the world, the signs multiply. Strange auroras paint the skies near the equator. Animals migrate erratically, birds fly in reversed patterns. Magnetic compasses twitch and fail. And deep within the Pacific, a new chain of volcanoes awakens, as if stirred by a hand beneath the crust. Ancient prophecies resurface. The Hopi speak of the red star Kachina, the harbinger of great change. The Mayan codices whisper of the star that returns to awaken the gods. In Egypt, inscriptions long overlooked reveal new meaning under infrared light. When the red one crosses, the hidden ones will rise. And the hidden ones, the descendants of the Anunnaki lineages, are listening. The Council of Thoth, the last order of Enki's followers, gathers in secret beneath the sands of Saqqara. Their lineage has preserved knowledge that the world has long forgotten, the harmonic codes of the pyramids, the map of the grid, and the timeline of Nibiru's return. They know this event is not apocalypse, but transition, the end of one frequency, the birth of another. In the stillness of an underground chamber, illuminated only by faint blue light reflected from ancient quartz, they perform the rite of resonance. The sound that fills the air is older than language, a deep, pure tone that causes the sand on the floor to ripple and dance. The earth hums in response. Above them, the stars shift slightly, aligning once more into the pattern of the sacred grid. Orion, Sirius, and the Pleiades fall into perfect symmetry, as they did in the age of the builders. And from beyond the veil of the solar system, a new vibration enters the field, a low, thunderous resonance that shakes the fabric of the world itself. Nibiru is near. But not all who await its return do so in reverence. The descendants of Enlil's faction, the architects of silence, move swiftly to contain the awakening dot. In the deep bunkers beneath the Arctic Circle, they reactivate the old frequency dampeners, vast magnetic structures once used to stabilize the planet's resonance during the Great Flood. They believe that the arrival of Nibiru will destabilize the Earth's core, unleashing cataclysm. But their goal is not salvation. It is control. For they know that when Nibiru returns, humanity's DNA, carrying the dormant code of its creators, will begin to awaken. Hidden strands, long considered junk, will start resonating with the same frequencies emitted by the approaching planet. Dreams will sharpen. Intuition will surge. The boundary between thought and manifestation will thin. And in that moment, humanity will no longer be controllable. So they flood the world with noise, literal and spiritual. Frequencies of distraction, waves of distortion, endless signal. Every device, every screen, every broadcast, designed to keep the mind asleep while the stars call it to rise. Yet, beneath the noise, the old song keeps playing. In the jungles of Central America, a team of archaeologists unearthed something extraordinary, a stone disk covered in strange metallic residue, carved with both Mayan glyphs and cuneiform signs. The hybrid language reads, "When the red planet returns, let the disk sing once more." When exposed to certain frequencies, the disk vibrates and emits harmonic tones unlike anything heard before, tones that match the background resonance of the Earth. It is one of the keys, the harmonic devices used to synchronize the planetary grid when Nibiru last approached. And there are more. In Turkey, under Göbekli Tepe, lies another dot. In Bolivia, beneath Tiwanaku, another sleeps beneath layers of obsidian. Each temple, each ancient monument, hides one fragment of the planetary symphony. When the fragments unite, the grid will awaken in full, and humanity's frequency will match the heavens. Meanwhile, in orbit, satellites detect something impossible. A massive object, glowing faintly red, moves through the Kuiper belt, bending light and gravity as it comes. Its trajectory is slow but deliberate, its orbit precise. The media calls it Planet X. But in the secret archives of the Vatican, an ancient tablet confirms what the watchers already fear. The Star of Kings returns to judge the makers. The Anunnaki are coming home. The debate among the awakened factions splits the hidden world in two. One side, the children of Enki, believe that the return of Nibiru heralds liberation. The restoration of human consciousness to its divine potential. The other, the priests of Enlil, see it as the end of human sovereignty, the return of the gods to reclaim their creation. Both may be right. Because the Anunnaki who return may not be united either. The rift between Enki and Enlil that began eons ago never healed. And the stars remember war. As Nibiru draws closer, dreams across the world grow vivid. People see the same visions, towering beings of light, vast golden cities, a red planet with a radiant core. They awaken speaking ancient tongues they've never learned. Some are terrified. Others feel peace. The frequencies intensify. In Giza, a team of researchers detect subsonic pulses emanating from the Great Pyramid every 88 seconds. The signal aligns perfectly with the harmonic intervals described in the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian epic that first mentioned Nibiru. At Teotihuacan, strange plasma discharges light the air above the Pyramid of the Sun. At Stonehenge, electromagnetic fields surge unpredictably, distorting GPS signals and creating faint halos visible only to infrared cameras. The grid is almost awake. And as the vibrations synchronize, a beam of faint red light rises from each of the ancient sites, invisible to the naked eye but captured by orbital sensors. All converge toward the same point, a position in the sky just beyond Mars, where the red planet of legend now glows faintly against the void. The Earth is calling home. Then, on a night when the world holds its breath, the veil parts. In the deserts of Iraq, near the ruins of Ur, a crimson sphere appears in the sky. Not fiery, not blinding, but heavy, ancient, alive. The air hums. The ground trembles. Oceans whisper. And in that moment, every temple, every pyramid, every sacred site on earth begins to resonate together, a chord so deep it feels like the heartbeat of the planet itself. The stars seem to flicker in answer. In laboratories, instruments fail. In cathedrals, candles extinguish. And within human minds, a silent understanding unfolds, a memory older than civilization. The gods are returning. But this time, it will not be as rulers or saviors. They come as witnesses. To see whether humanity, their greatest creation, has become worthy of the divine spark they left within it. Far above the clouds, the crimson planet glides through the void, its surface shimmering with golden light. On its surface stand vast crystalline structures, temples that mirror those of Earth, glowing softly in resonance. And within one of them, a being of immense presence gazes through the mists toward the blue planet below. His eyes are filled not with wrath, but with sorrow and pride. He is Enki. The first teacher. The bringer of life. He turns to another, Enlil, stern and silent, the keeper of order. Their song has begun, Enki says. They remember. Enlil's gaze lingers on Earth, the world that once defied them both. Then the choice is theirs, he replies quietly. As it always was. And so begins the last chapter of the story, the crossing of Nibiru, the awakening of the hidden DNA, and the final test of creation. For the fate of the earth will not be decided by gods or kings, but by the harmony of a single species remembering what it truly is. The echo of the divine made flesh. The moment approaches. The frequencies rise. And as Nibiru's light touches the earth once more, the ancient prophecy is fulfilled. When heaven returns to kiss the earth, the children of the stars shall awaken. Part 15, The Great Awakening, Humanity's Return to the Stars. The sky burns with colors Earth has not seen in 10,000 years. Bands of crimson and gold ripple across the heavens, not as fire or storm, but as song, light shaped by sound, vibrating through every living thing. The world stands suspended in stillness, caught between two breaths of time. And then, softly, everything begins to move again. The oceans pulse with strange luminescence. Mountains hum like tuning forks. The air itself feels alive, thick with memory. The crossing has begun. For those who have waited, who have listened, who have kept the old frequencies alive through centuries of silence, this is the moment foretold in every fragment of every ancient tongue. The return of the light. The awakening of the divine spark. Nibiru glides across the night like a red sun, immense yet gentle, bathing the earth in a frequency that pierces not the eyes, but the soul. Its gravitational field bends more than space, it bends perception itself. Time slows. Thought expands. Memory unravels. Across the world, people begin to remember. A child in Cairo dreams of the Nile before the first pyramid rose, when the gods still walked the earth. A monk in Tibet hears a voice within the wind whispering the syllables of creation. A farmer in the Yucatan feels his heartbeat match the rhythm of the jungle around him, as if the trees themselves breathe with him. Everywhere, the invisible veil between the seen and unseen thins. Dreams bleed into waking life. The collective hum of consciousness begins to align. And from that alignment, a new field is born, one that no machine can measure, no eye can see. It is the field of remembrance. Deep beneath the sands of Saqqara, the Council of Thoth gathers one last time. Their chambers vibrate with low harmonics as quartz pillars shimmer with inner fire. They have prepared for this moment through generations of silence. The old texts were never prophecy, they were instruction. And now, the grid responds. They raise the ancient keys, small discs of gold engraved with spiraling patterns. Each one resonates with a different tone, a fragment of the planet's forgotten song. As they begin to chant, the disks ignite with light, sending waves of energy through the corridors. Every pyramid, every temple across the earth, begins to awaken in synchrony. In Mexico, Chichen Itza glows under the red light of Nibiru. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat trembles faintly as its towers align perfectly with the rising constellation of Orion. In the Andes, Machu Picchu hums like a tuning crystal, resonating with frequencies that match those emanating from Giza. The earth is singing again. And humanity, for the first time in memory, begins to listen. The noise of industry, the hum of cities, the static of endless signals, all fall silent. Power grids fail, satellites flicker, and yet no one panics. Instead, a calm awareness spreads like dawn through the species. People begin to hear music, not from speakers or instruments, but from the earth itself. They feel it through their bones, their skin, their very blood. It is the frequency of home. Then something even more extraordinary happens. DNA begins to respond. Under the influence of the harmonics, dormant sequences, long considered genetic junk, activate. Cells glow faintly under microscopic observation. Neural activity surges in patterns unseen before. Humans begin to perceive the world in dimensions previously invisible. They see fields of light connecting all things. They sense emotion as color. They feel thought as vibration. Humanity has begun to awaken. And as they awaken, the Anunnaki return. Not as gods descending in ships of fire, but as radiant forms of light, frequencies clothed in energy, shimmering between states of matter. They appear where the harmonics are strongest, in temples, on mountaintops, within the dreaming minds of those ready to see. Enki stands among them, luminous and vast, his presence felt rather than seen. His voice does not echo, it resonates directly within the mind. Children of earth, he speaks, his tone both thunder and whisper, we did not create you to serve. We created you to become. You have walked through the ages blind and burdened, yet you never forgot how to look upward. And now, as the cycles turn once more, the choice is yours. His words ripple across the grid, through every temple and every soul. You may remain as you are, bound to form and shadow, or you may rise with us, beyond the veil of time, into the light from which all things are born. And humanity feels the truth within it. In the heart of the Amazon, an old shaman kneels upon the earth. He presses his hand to the soil and whispers a single word in his ancestral tongue. It means, thank you. Around him, the jungle glows, not from light, but from awareness. In New York, crowds gather on rooftops to watch the crimson sphere fill the sky. There is no fear. No chaos. Only silence. Some close their eyes and weep, not from sadness, but recognition. In deserts, on mountaintops, in cities and forests, billions of hearts begin to beat as one. The resonance reaches critical mass. Then, a pulse. A wave of light, gentle yet infinite, expands outward from the earth, passing through oceans, mountains, and sky, reaching into the void. It touches Nibiru, and for a moment, the two worlds are connected by a bridge of light, the same bridge described in ancient texts as the stairway of the gods. Energy flows freely between them. Knowledge, memory, essence, the wisdom of ages exchanged in a single harmonic breath. On Nibiru, the temples blaze with color as the Anunnaki watch in awe. For the creation has surpassed the creator. Humanity no longer needs to be guided. They are the song itself. The world shifts. The red glow fades, replaced by an indescribable radiance, white and gold, vibrating in every atom. People see each other not as separate beings, but as facets of one vast consciousness, refracting the same light through infinite forms. Time dissolves. Fear evaporates. Cities vanish, but not through destruction, they dissolve into light. The physical gives way to the luminous. The earth itself transforms, its magnetic poles realign, its heartbeat steadies, its grid stabilizes into perfect geometry. From orbit, it no longer shines blue, but blue gold, a world reborn. And somewhere in that new light, Enlil watches silently. The architect of judgment, the keeper of order. He turns to Enki and speaks softly, his voice finally at peace. Perhaps this was your plan all along. Enki smiles, a gesture older than stars. Not mine, brother. Theirs. He looks once more upon the earth, now radiant and alive beyond measure. The children of dust have remembered the stars. The frequencies begin to fade, not into silence, but into harmony, a single eternal chord that hums quietly through the universe. And as the last red glimmer of Nibiru disappears into the distance, the voice of humanity rises like dawn, whispering into the infinite. We are awake. The Great Awakening is not the end. It is the beginning. For every civilization, every world, every consciousness is part of the same eternal rhythm, the dance of creation, the breathing of the divine. The Anunnaki have returned not to rule, but to remember alongside their children. And together, they move toward a light without end, beyond stars, beyond gods, beyond time itself. Because the true secret of Nibiru was never about planets or power. It was about the circle of remembrance, the journey of the soul returning to its source. And so, the story of the Anunnaki ends where it began, not in the dust of creation, but in the infinite silence of the stars, where every heartbeat, every whisper, and every act of wonder is a note in the eternal song of the universe.